no matter how well we have done throughout the regulation 90 minutes, there's still the extra time, the additional time that was added on because of injuries, because of fouls, because of refereeing decisions. But the concentration level must not dip, and unfortunately, Singapore somehow collapsed in the final moments of the game. Singapore 0, Vietnam 2, both goals coming very late at the end of the game, and pretty unfortunate for the hosts under these circumstances in the first leg of the ASEAN Championship semi-finals held at Jalan Besar Stadium earlier this evening. And for Vietnam, to them, getting those 2 late goals was a bonus. For, if you have actually noticed for much of the game how they had been set up, the Vietnamese were looking for, you can say, soak and counter with a rare 5-4-1 defensive formation and try to utilize their usual attacking ploy where they will they will either make the through pass or pump that long ball towards the striker, with the strikers having to evade the Singapore offside trap. But unfortunately, unlike the opponents in the group stage, Singapore were quite different for a couple of reasons. The first one is because the Singapore defense, until very late in the game, had a very disciplined game. Yes, Vietnam had 2 or 3 shots at the back of the net, but all these were ruled out because one is a straightforward infringement when Vietnam's number 18 had the ball at the back of the net in the first half. The second one was rather controversial because actually it was a very good goal by Nguyen Xuan Song, or more previously known as Rafaelson. He had a very beautiful volley from near inside the box, just inside the box, but he was adjudged to have handled the ball after a lengthy VAR review, and that actually gave quite a lot of frustration for Vietnam, because otherwise, most of the times when I would say a lot less than they had at the group stage, they actually managed to get the ball over the top of the Singapore defense, but Singapore back four was actually more composed in keeping the offside trap. Although it could be rather risky, as we all found out in the end when Xuan Song actually scored the second goal at the far post off a corner after he received a flick on from Vietnam's number 7. So ultimately, at this stage of any competition, especially in the knockout stages, in the semi-finals, the result really matters. Vietnam were ready to go home with a 0-0 draw because they know that they have all the advantages in the second leg on Sunday at Viet Tri Stadium. The cold weather conditions, the natural grass, the partisan support, they have that, but not in Singapore, where there are only 250 over Vietnamese fans at the gallery, and where the majority are Singapore fans, and playing on artificial turf, a surface that has given the Golden Star Dragons or Warriors quite a lot of problems at Rizal Memorial Stadium in Manila in an earlier group stage. So you can see from the outset, Singapore played with a lot of intent. They wanted to do certain things. They knew that Vietnam were probably happy to sit back and wait for Singapore to make some mistakes. But at the same time, Singapore also wanted to make an impression in front of a sold-out capacity crowd at Jalan Besar, although there were still a few empty seats here and there. But generally, it was actually sold out. So the Lions have every incentive to want to perform, to play to their best, to repay the faith and the support, especially for some of them who have actually queued over the past weekend overnight just to get those tickets. And actually, even with that intent of going home with a goalless draw in the first leg, Vietnam actually had the better chances in the first half. I mean, apart from the early disallowed goal in the 10th minute, and followed by an attempt by Xuan Song or Rafaelson, whose overhead bicycle kick actually hit the crossbar, and he was a constant menace to Singapore's defense whenever he had the ball in the final third throughout the game. And also, of course, Vietnam could have actually taken the lead as, I mean, early chances, one disallowed goal, one hit the crossbar, only to be ruled for offside. Then, in the 39th minute, they capitalized on a very poor ball control by Irfan Najib, Singapore's right back of the day, to go on another attack, and Bivui Hao, he cut into the box only to send a rather tame low shot towards Izwan Mahmud, who had little trouble diving down to collect the ball. And actually, you can say Singapore had a half decent attempt despite having so much possession in the first half, like 70% in the first half with 84% passing accuracy in the first 45 minutes. Singapore barely make a dent in the final in the final third. They were not really causing much trouble in the Vietnamese attacking area, and as I mentioned before in a recent video series on long throw-ins, Lionel Tan, like so many others who tried to do a Pramata Ahad, but with all these long throw-ins, it is more like hantam lonto lah. Anyhow throw the ball long. It's like Lionel Tan's throws from either side of the pitch, long throws, they didn't even cause confusion inside the Vietnamese 6-yard box. The defenders they intercepted it very easily, caused no trouble. In general, it's like this is not how you're supposed to play the long throw-in as an attacking weapon, but I think Singapore was probably rehearsing it quite in a bit last minute, and they had not given much thought into that. But it's understandable because you do want to play to your strengths, and the Lions were playing without suspended attacking midfielder Kyoga Nakamura, who has been a good link up between the midfield and attack, with his ability to dictate the tempo of the play and also to distribute the forward passes that allow the Lions to go on quick counter attacks. I think that effect really showed because Singapore were not able to threaten the Vietnamese goal much. The shots that we had at goal were very tame. We lacked that finishing touch to convert those chances that for all the possession Singapore had. And it's quite rare that Singapore had a lot of possession in the first half, I think, especially with a side like Vietnam who kept on their game plan. And it's a very specific game plan that Vietnam were looking at to ensure that they would go home with at least a goalless draw. That's what they wanted. They just did not want defeat, and they accomplished that. Then comes the second half. The second half is where Singapore actually really upped their tempo going forward, and especially they could have actually had they had better positioning to finish early in the second half, especially in the 55th minute when Safwa Maharudin, who was earlier going up there for a corner, had stayed in the opposite half of the pitch. He intercepted a very loose pass from Vietnam to reignite a counter attack with a very fluid movement that eventually saw, you can say, Ryan Stewart, who was the left winger of the day, left side midfielder of the day, being poor on his first touch. I mean, when you do not have players who have a good first touch or good finishing, and they were overly reliant on Shawar Anwar, and I think you can say even to an extent Faris Ramli for the goals. Shawar Anwar had 4 goals in this tournament, but he has been very quiet for much of tonight. He was very productive in holding the ball. He was productive in the final third, trying to cause problems in the Vietnamese back line, but he himself did not really have any shots on target. And when you're relying on someone who is for the goals but he's not really shooting, it's like asking for a little trouble that was to come much later in the game. And even as Faris Ramli came on in the middle of the second half at the hour mark, he did cause problems on the left, and you can say that Singapore were undone actually by the rather inconsistent referee from the South Korean official in the middle. When especially in the 80th minute, when Faris Ramli actually retained possession of the ball near the goal line and cut into the box, only to be shoved down by Ho Tan Tai, the Vietnam's number 3 left fullback. But there was no penalty given, which I did personally find it a bit perplexing. Perhaps the VAR officials thought that contact came just outside the box rather than inside the box. So Vietnam got away with that, although Singapore nearly once again had another escape when Shen Song or Rafaelson, he had a very beautiful volley that went into the top far corner of the net. Had that been allowed, it would have been one of the goals of this ASEAN Championship. But again, a very long VAR review. It's like those virtual assistant referees, and they were taking a very long time to come to a decision that whether it's a goal, whether it was a handball, whether it was on the shoulder or a little bit more on the arm, we do not know. But the thing is, the lengthy decision making is one of the biggest banes in modern officiating, especially when I think if we look at the World Cups and even your European leagues or even the European Championships, the VARs who are trained in these tournaments, or especially in Europe, they already make more split-second decisions accurately on whether this was a goal or this wasn't a goal. Perhaps it's because this is in Southeast Asia and the Asian referees are not accustomed to all these things yet, that it has taken a while to replay from this angle and a different angle, and even from us watching online or on television, looking at all those replays, it was very hard to ascertain that this was handball by Shen Song or Rafaelson inside the penalty area before he took that right foot volley, which was a beauty, like his overhead scissors kick that hit the crossbar as well. But that lengthy decision making really impacted Vietnam for a little while, because it really riled them up after the goal was disallowed on the 80th, in the last 10 minutes of the game. And even Kim Sang-sing got booked because of that. So that lengthy pure decision making helped Singapore, but it did not help Vietnam. But once again, you wonder which side the South Korean referee is on, because to be honest, Singapore had every right to feel a bit indignated, to feel like why injustice came to them because of a Shakir attempt to shield the ball, which unfortunately saw him handle accidentally. But a handball is a handball, and you cannot get away with handballs at this stage of the tournament or even at any level, especially in the age of VAR. And you don't even need that technology. The referee just blew to the spot, and there was no need for further television review or further viewing of it, which you can say that broke Singapore's spirit at that moment and thereafter. It's like once Nguyen Thian Lin scored the goal converted the penalty quite comfortably. Then you got Xuan Song converting from at the far post off a corner via a flick on late on. It shows one thing. No matter how well we have done throughout the regulation 90 minutes, there's still the extra time, the additional time that was added on because of injuries, because of fouls, because of refereeing decisions. But the concentration level must not dip, and unfortunately Singapore somehow collapsed in the final moments of the game, which was a big pity because Singapore had more than creditably held on their own, regardless whether the refereeing decisions were on their side or otherwise, which was lamentable, to be honest. But they can't just let their spirits drop just after a penalty decision went against them and they just collapse. And you can tell that once the mental collapse was felt within the whole team, the result was probably inevitable. With once you had a corner, the way they defended, the desperation the Lions had, that second goal was really coming because nobody was looking at Rafaelson coming in unmarked at the far post. That flick on, they were all looking, but nobody was marking at the far post. That far post, it was blank. And all Xuan Song had to do was just to tap home. And that was it. Game over for Singapore. You can say Vietnam barely deserved the win because they struggled with the artificial pitch conditions, the bounce, and also you can say with that game plan they had, they weren't looking to play attractive attacking football but hoping to use their weapon of getting those through balls to the attackers, for their strikers, especially Xuan Song, to run past the Singapore defense to break past the offside trap, which did not work. It was a penalty that was given to them for Shakir's innocuous handball that actually provided this lifeline for the Vietnamese. And now, in a way, because Vietnam had won the first leg 2-0, it is going to be a very uphill task for Singapore when they travel to Viet-Tri Stadium in the away second leg on Sunday. Not only are they down by 2 goals, they are also going to face a venue that is bigger than the Jalan Besar Stadium, 20,000 capacity crowd at the stadium, with Vietnam going to play their attacking football. It is going to be a very long night for Singapore, and barring any miraculous events that happen on Sunday, the tie is for Vietnam's to lose, because Vietnam now have 1 foot into the ASEAN Championship final, and I see Kim Sang-sik's men finishing the job on Sunday, and that will be it. Because otherwise, before those 2 late goals, Singapore would actually have had 3 goalless draws. But now, in 4 home games between Singapore and Vietnam, where the ASEAN Championship matches were held in Singapore, Singapore had drawn 2 goalless draws and 2 defeats. 0-1 in 2008 and now 0-2. And the 26th year of another win against Vietnam since the famous 1998 AFF Tiger Cup triumph, as it was previously known. The wait still goes on, and it's going to be a long while. But Vietnam would be very happy with that 0-2 result, and they would be very confident going for the kill to finish off the tie by the halftime of the second leg on Sunday. It's a long, tough road ahead for Singapore, where Singapore could see their ASEAN Championship campaign end at this stage in a way in which they surpass themselves through good, strong team spirit, strong work ethic. But at those split-second moments where that concentration went down, where that split moment of lapses in focus, it is fatal at this stage of the tournament, because it's not about how good you are throughout that 90 minutes before in regulation time. It's how good you are you to focus throughout the entire game, even if it reaches 120 minutes. That means if it ever comes to an incredible 30 minutes of additional time, still the focus has to be there. Otherwise, just even a single goal will have made the difference. And I think this is the lesson Singapore has to take away in an otherwise creditable performance but devastating poor result against Vietnam, who initially came here for a 0-0 draw, but went home with a win with 2 very late goals and one foot into the ASEAN Championship final.